Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Genki 2 Lesson 21 live stream. Today we're going to be covering passive sentences. Now, I know a lot of you have been having trouble with these, and I've always had trouble with passive sentences as well, so I want to go over them in detail today. We're going to have lots of extra examples for those, so stick around for that. We're also going to be covering things done for a purpose with te aru, and while, during, and between with aida ni, make something, insert adjective, and I want you to do something with te hoshii. These are our color codes, and before we jump into the lesson, I've got to do what I always do and talk quickly about the Toki ni Andy Patreon. If you'd like to help support the Toki ni Andy channel and you've been finding these lessons really helpful and you'd like some bonus material and extra stuff to help you out, please consider checking out the Patreon, where we have listening and shadowing videos where you can practice speaking Japanese with a video, and textbook practice, where we go over all the textbook practice exercises in the back of each lesson with you via a video, and vocabulary videos where you can repeat after and shadow Yuki's native Japanese and practice the vocabulary with us. There's also tests for each of the Genki lessons in Genki 1, and there will eventually be some for Genki 2 when we finish the book as well. There's lots more material coming soon. When we start intermediate material, I'm going to be releasing new material for that, as well as material for the Genki lessons. So we're going to continue releasing Genki material, new stuff on the Patreon. Lots going on there. There's a merch store with lots of different cool stuff that Yuki designed, and more coming soon, hopefully. And of course, we've got the YouTube. Even if you can't help support financially, that's perfectly okay. Just try your best to learn as much as you can, and hit the like button if you don't mind. That helps a lot. And share this with anyone you might know who is also learning Japanese, as maybe it'll help them too. The first section tonight is passive sentences, and passive sentences can throw a lot of people off, and they threw me off for a very long time. So I decided to go ahead and put a lot of extra examples in here tonight to try and really nail it down. It still may be confusing, but hopefully it won't be too bad. At least making it isn't too difficult. To make the passive form, you can use godan conjugation rules, or godan katsuyo. So we got to go over what godan katsuyo is really quickly. It's for verbs that end in u, tsu, mu, bu, nu, ku, gu, and su, and sometimes ru. You can conjugate them in into many different conjugations using a simple rule. Verbs that end in iru and eru are usually called ichidan verbs, but for passive sentences, ichidan verbs are treated in exactly the same way as godan verbs. So that's exciting, right? So to conjugate godan verbs, all you have to do is move them up and down a hiragana chart. Oops. Up and down a hiragana chart like this, and then add certain endings to the end of that. So for the passive form, both godan and ichidan verbs go up to the not the A column, but the A column, and then you add deru. So we move up to the A column. So for the verb aruku, which is to walk, it becomes aruka. And then you add deru. So aruku, aruka, arukareru, which is the passive form of to walk. Now, there are still two irregulars for the passive form, and those are suru and kuru. Suru becomes sareru. Sareru, that's the passive form of to do. And kuru, which is to come, becomes korareru. Korareru. So you just have to memorize those two irregular conjugations into the passive form. That's great and all, but what are passive sentences? Passive sentences are similar to what they are in English or in other languages, and that is, you're basically focusing on who something is happening to, as opposed to who is doing the acting. So for example, we call them in Genki and in some other situations the victim. So the person that the action is happening to, they're marked with wa. The person who is doing the thing, or the thing that is doing the thing, the nanika, the doer, person, or thing, marked with ni. And then the object, if there is one in the sentence, takes o, and then sareru, the passive verb. So in Genki, they suggest that this is usually a bad thing that is happening to the, quote, victim. And passive sentences aren't always bad things. They can often imply that the thing that was happening to the, quote, victim was a bad thing, but that's not always the case. So we're going to go over a bunch of examples tonight to point out when that maybe is the case or when that isn't the case. Just keep in mind that passive sentences in Japanese are basically just like they are in English, and they focus on the person who's being acted upon as opposed to the actor. The difference with Japanese is that, unlike in English, you can sort of use the passive form to suggest that things that aren't necessarily done directly to you affect you in some negative way. So for example, if your cat were to run away, you could say with the passive form essentially that my cat ran away on me. My cat ran away on me. You wouldn't use the passive form for that in English, but in Japanese, that's the way you would sort of express that. So let's go ahead and jump into some examples, and hopefully we can make it a little bit more clear. First, we're going to start with some simple examples, and then we're going to go into more specific nuances of the passive form, and hopefully get to iron it out that way. Very common phrase you're going to hear in the summer here in Japan is ka ni sasareta. Ka ni sasareta. A ka is a mosquito. I was bitten by a mosquito. So in case you don't remember what the passive form is in English, it's basically has done a verb or is doing a verb. So it's a be verb, I believe, is what it's referred to. So was bitten, as opposed to a mosquito bit me. I was bitten by a mosquito. So we're focusing on me, the person who experienced the terrible thing, which is being bitten by a mosquito, as opposed to the mosquito who's doing the biting. So that's what passive is. It's focusing on the target of the action. So ka ni sasareta. If there's no subject mentioned here, so boku wa ka ni sasareta, if there's no subject, in this case boku wa, it's pretty much always assumed that it's the speaker. So ka ni sasareta. You'll notice that sasaru, sasu, is to stab, as opposed to bite. For some reason, we say bite in English for mosquito bites, but Japanese is a little bit more accurate. They say stabbed, which is more accurate if you think about it when we're talking about mosquito bites. So ka ni sasareta. So it's sasu, so we went up to the a column, sasareru, and you conjugate passive forms of the verb, the deru, as an ichidan verb. So you just drop the do and add ta for the past tense. Sasareta. I was bitten by a mosquito. 知らない人に殴られました. I was punched by a stranger. I was punched by a stranger. So far negative things, right? 知らない人, a stranger, に殴られました. 殴られました. So once again, you treat this form as an ichidan verb. You just drop the ru and add mashita for the past form, the polite past tense. 犬に足におしっこされた. I had my leg peed on by a dog. So this English sentence is a bit weird, but this is probably how you would say it in Japanese. 犬に足におしっこされた. The dog peed on my leg, but we're focusing on me because it was done to me. How dare he? I had my leg peed on by a dog. 犬に足におしっこされた. So far negative still, yeah? Alright, next sentence. 俺はお菓子を見つけられました. I had my snacks found on me. So when we're talking about the passive form in a negative sentence, you can sort of add the words on me. I had this happen to me, or someone did this on me, I guess is the similar English. We wouldn't necessarily use that in English in sentences like this, but it's the only way I could really sort of express that sort of, it happened to me, how dare they, sort of nuance of a sentence like this. But that's not always the case. Not all sentences are nuanced like that. So there's a couple types of passive form, and Genki refers to them a little bit differently than I'm going to be talking about them tonight. I pulled some of this information from all over the internet and a few other places to try and get it more accurate. I'm referring to the direct passive in a slightly different way than Genki refers to it. And I think this is a little bit more accurate. Direct passive means that an actor, usually a person, does something directly to the subject, in this case, me. So in the first sentence, right? 僕はお母さんに怒られた. My mother was angry at me. So I'm the focus of here. My mother was angry at me, or my mom. I can't think of a great way to express this in English to make it sound like it does in Japanese, but my mother was angry at me is the translation. But 僕はお母さんに怒られた. My mother was angry at me. This is direct because my mom is being angry at me directly. So she's directly doing something to me. Next sentence is 友達に電話されて嬉しかったです. So here's a situation where it's not really negative. So once again, Genki pointed out that these are generally victim crimes and things are happening to them and they're not happy about it. But it depends on the context. In this case, I was called by my friend, but I was happy about it. So you're going to be noticing mostly by context whether or not it's a negative nuance being expressed here. In this case, 友達に電話されて嬉しかったです. Once again, this is a direct passive sentence because they directly called me. Next sentence, 銀行に電話されてめんどくさかったです. So I was called by the bank and it was a pain in the neck. めんどくさかったです. this case, it's basically the same sentence, but this is a negative nuance because, you can tell from the adjective that comes after it. It was a pain in the neck. So I'm happy that my friend called me, not so happy that the bank called me. But maybe some days I don't feel like getting a phone call, so I wouldn't be happy if my friend called me. So just because tomodachi ni denma sareta, if I said that, doesn't necessarily mean it's positive. So you just have to pay attention to the context around the sentences to figure out whether it is positive or negative. But you can often assume that if there is no other context, that perhaps it was a negative experience. So the indirect passive, this is the type of sentence that is unique to Japanese. We don't really say stuff like this in English. This is unique to Japanese because you basically say that you feel like someone did something to you even though they didn't intentionally do it to you. Like this sentence. 背が高い人に前に立たれた. I was stood in front of by a tall person. So we wouldn't use the passive for this in English. That's not how we would express this. We would say a tall person stood in front of me. I was stood in front of by a tall person. It's not a very good sentence in English. It might work, but we don't really say it that way. So 背が高い人に前に立たれた. This works because the person isn't doing anything directly to me. The person is just going and standing there. But I feel like it's being done to me, so I can use the passive here. And this would be referred to in many books, maybe not Genki, as the indirect passive. So usually actions are done by people for indirect and for direct, but there are some exceptions to this, very few of them, but one of them is ame ni furareta. I was rained on. So this is one of the few situations where you might be able to use the passive form for inanimate objects, but you're basically personifying the rain in this sentence. So ame ni furareta, I was rained on by the rain, basically. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense in English, but just know that this is a sentence that you may encounter. Ame ni furareta, I was rained on. That makes sense in English, actually, but anyway. So one other thing we need to talk about is particles. If you remember, we go back up to the top, we had the person, the victim, or the person who's being acted upon is marked by wa. And then the actor is marked by ni. And then the action that they did. But there are some situations where you will use other particles. One of those is, for example, you can use the passive with inanimate objects, actually. So for example, この家は泥から作られています. This house is made from mud. Is made from mud. So in this case, we're using the passive to talk about, we're focusing on the house. So the house is the main thing we want to focus on in this sentence. And we want to mention that it's made from mud. So we wouldn't mark mud with ni. We would mark it with kara. So when you're talking about what something is made from, you would use kara. The next sentence is マリオは任天堂さんによって作られています. Now once again, Mario, if you think of him as a person, this sentence doesn't really work. But if you think of him like a character, like a made thing, then this sentence works because when you're talking about a person or a company that made a thing, generally an inanimate object, you'll use によって. So I think the example in Genki for this one was like この絵はピカソによって描かれています. So this picture was drawn by Picasso. In this case, I'm saying Mario is made by Nintendo. So when an inanimate object or a thing or a character or a product is made by a company or a person, you're going to use によって as opposed to ni. So those are the particles. In a formal setting, especially writing によって is preferred over に落書きはピカソによって描かれた. この落書きはピカソに描かれた. The doodle was drawn by Picasso. So I guess in a formal setting, especially in writing, によって is preferred over に. 食べられる is the same in potential and passive. They look the same though. Yes. So potential and passive forms, especially for ichidan verbs, they look exactly the same. But from context, you'll know. Like 食べられた. If you're talking about getting eaten by a tiger, 虎に食べられた. I was eaten by a tiger. Nobody's going to make the mistake and think that you mean that you can eat the tiger. The ni particle also helps with that. 虎を食べられました would mean that I was able to eat the tiger. So the o particle sort of differentiates those, but with the ni particle, 虎に食べられました means I was eaten by a tiger. Or if there's a different subject like 肉は虎に食べられました, that means that the meat was eaten by the tiger. But so then the subject makes it obvious which one we're using. 肉は虎を食べられたって that doesn't make any sense. What I just said was that the meat was able to eat the tiger. So with particles and context, it's very obvious whether or not it's passive or potential. Though the conjugations do often look the same, especially for ichidan verbs. So let's go over some slightly more complicated examples. I don't know, I may have confused you even more now, but we'll see. Hopefully these final, more complicated examples can help you out a little bit. So, 12歳の頃、お母さんに全部の日記を見つけられました。Around the time I was 12, all of my journals were found by my mother. 12歳の頃、お母さんに全部の日記を見つけられました。Around the time I was 12, all my journals were found by my mother. So this is slightly more complicated, but it's a very basic, direct, passive sentence. My mom is the actor. I am obviously the victim, and she found all of my journals. So my journals were all found by my mother. 猫は犬に追いかけられた. So up until now, we've either had inanimate objects or myself as the subject of the sentences, but that doesn't have to be the case. In this case, I'm making something else the subject of the sentence. In this case, a cat. 猫は犬に追いかけられた. The cat was chased by the dog. I'm sure the cat's not happy about it, but it's a pretty sort of just descriptive sentence of what's going on. We see a cat. We want to focus the sentence on the cat, not the fact that the dog is doing the chasing. So we say 猫は犬に追いかけられた. So that's basically, this sentence sort of really expresses when you'd want to use this. If you wanted to focus on the fact that, look at that dog, it's chasing the cat, you don't use the passive. If you want to think about the poor cat who's being chased, and you want to focus on it, then you use the passive to say, 猫は犬に追いかけられた. Next sentence is, 友達はレイさんにデートに誘われました. My friend was asked on a date by Miss Rei. So Genki pointed out actually that sentences like this, particularly being asked on a date and a few other different situations, are not necessarily negative. I think that a lot of different passive sentences are not necessarily negative, and it's very much dependent on the context, not the verb. So just because デートに誘われました, just because that sentence is being used doesn't mean it's not negative. And it's a little bit confusing in the way Genki wrote it, because you could think that. You could read what they're explaining in Genki and say, okay, so if it's デートに誘われました, that means it's a positive thing. And that's not necessarily the case. If the person who we're saying this sentence to knows that my friend hates Rei-san, then of course this is a negative sentence. 友達はレイさんにデートに誘われました. Oh no, right? But if I don't think that, then maybe my friend is happy that they invited her. So the whole, like, the massive focus on it being negative is maybe a little bit out of place in the Genki lesson. It's a little bit confusing, because it's really just we're focusing on my friend instead of Rei-san who did the asking. Next sentence. このスマホは Google によって作られました. So once again, we have an inanimate object here. We've got このスマホ, and it was made by Google. So we use によって as opposed to に. If we were talking about that it was made from metals or something, we would use から。このスマホは金属から作られました. So this phone was made from metal. That's when we would use から. Those are the particles. So let's go ahead and jump into the dialogue. I'll read it slowly once, then at full speed I'll go over the English. Then we'll do question time and I'll get to your questions and see if I've confused you even more. All right, we've got Yuki and Andy, I think, here. So 安藤さんに冷蔵庫のものを全部食べられちゃった。俺は毎週あいつに食べ物を食べられちゃうんだよ。あと昨日夜10時に来られてソファで寝られたよ。たまに失礼だね、あの人。そして今朝車を使われたんだ、 マジマジ。Full speed. 安藤さんに冷蔵庫のものを全部食べられちゃった。俺は毎週あいつに食べ物を食べられちゃうんだよ。あと、昨日夜10時に来られてソファで寝られたよ。たまに失礼だね、あの人。そして、今朝車使われたんだ。マジ Let's jump over the English. I've got a few extra little points to add into here. 安藤さんに冷蔵庫のものを全部食べられちゃった。安藤さん ate all of the food in my fridge on me. So the passive form when it's being used in a negative sense is very frequently combined, at least in my experience, with てしまう. In this case, this is the shortened form because we're having a casual conversation between friends. てしまう, if you remember, becomes ちゃった for verbs that end in て and じゃった for verbs whose て form would end in で. So 食べられちゃった. So he completely ate all of the food in my fridge on me. 俺は I guess up here this was and we changed it to It basically means the same thing. 俺は毎週あいつに食べ物を食べられちゃうんだ. Now I know what you're talking about, Dan. I didn't realize. I thought you were just laughing at He eats all of the food on me every week. So all of these are in the negative sense, just so you know. あと、昨日夜10時に来られてソファで寝られたよ。Also, yesterday he showed up at 10 p.m. and slept on my sofa. The English here I didn't put into the passive form, but the English should probably be something more along the lines of, see, this is something we would really say very much in English, but he came to my house on me, or he has come to my house on me, and he slept on the sofa on me. It doesn't really make sense in English, right? But in Japanese, this all makes sense. たまに失礼だね、あの人. Yeah, sometimes he's rude, that guy. そして今朝車を使われたんだ. Also, this morning he used my car on me. マジ? Seriously? マジ? Seriously. All right, so question time. Tell us something that happened to or which was done to you that you're not very happy about. My sentence is アムステルダムに行った時、誰かに日記を盗まれました. If you didn't notice, it's a common theme in my life that people find and steal my journals. So this was the last time I ever wrote a journal. When it was stolen from me, I had walked across Spain for 2 months. I'd spent 2 months on foot walking across Spain, writing a journal every day in this really cool leather-bound journal, super thick. And I had hitchhiked from Spain to Paris and then met some friends there for a week. And then I hitchhiked from Paris to Berlin and I was writing in my journal every single day. I had to sleep in a park. I slept in a field on the first day of hitchhiking. I slept in a park on the second day out of Paris. And then I finally made it to Berlin to my friend's house. And then I worked on a sheep farm for a week, writing journals every day. And then on the way back from the sheep farm to meet another friend in England, I met some people because I missed a train in Belgium, in Brussels. I missed the last train. And I met some guys in the town square. And I stayed with them and we went to Amsterdam the next day because they were shocked that I had never been there. And while we were out and about in the town, when we got back to their car had been broken into and my backpack was stolen. The only thing I really cared about that was in there at the time was that journal that had 4 months of travel, basically blogs written in it. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and move on to things done for a purpose with てある. So てある is used for things that were ておく by someone, and you basically just take the て form and add the verb ある onto it as an auxiliary verb. So what てある is, there's no actor in a てある sentence. So what happens is, for example, if someone wants to tell me that dinner is made, not that they made it. For example, maybe Yuki says, dinner's made. That's when you use a てある form, as opposed to saying, I made dinner. It may have been her that made dinner, but the emphasis of the sentence is that it's finished. It's already made, or it's been made for a purpose and it's done. Maybe something is, I turned on the heater in the room so that the room is warm when we get there. That sentence would be with ておく. I turn on the heater in the room so that it'll be warm when we get there. But if you just want to say, oh, the heater's already on in the room, that's when you're going to use te aru. The heater's already on. So there's no actor in a te aru sentence. That's the first thing to keep in mind. Let's go over some examples and it should make it a little bit more clear. So, 作ってあります. It has been made already. Simple sentence. 作ってあります. It has been made. 書いてある. It has been written. 勉強してあります. I have it studied. So, it could be me that did the studying. It could be in some situations, but it's not necessarily obvious that it's the person speaking that did it. お茶を作ってありますよ. Tea is made and waiting. So once again here, it may be the speaker that made the tea, but it might not be. That's not what's important in the sentence. The important part of this sentence is that the tea is made. 私たちの部屋のヒーターがつけてあります. So we talked about this earlier. The heater in a room has been turned on. In our situation, Yuki probably did it. There's no one else in the house that could have, so it's probably her, and I know that, but that's not what's important. That's not what's being presented here. It's that the heater is on. 私たちの部屋のヒーターがつけてあります. 牛乳が買ってありますか? 買ってあるよ. Has milk been bought? 牛乳が買ってありますか? So I'm asking here, has milk been bought? I just read the English, right? So it's not did you buy milk? It's do we have milk is what's more being implied here. Have we bought milk? Something like that. 買ってあるよ. Yeah, I already have it bought, or I already have bought it. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that B, speaker B, is the one that did the buying. It just means that this sentence literally means, yes, we have milk. That's what it's emphasizing here. But it could be B that bought it, but that's not what's important. Okay, enough of that. And that's it. That's literally it. Super simple. Here's the dialogue. Ando-san is jumping into the picture. ただいまってここに住んでいないでしょ? まあな、車にガソリン入れてある? え? 入れてないよ? なんでだよ? 確かにガソリンが少ないなって思った。もう入れろよ。 Full speed. ただいまってここに住んでいないよ。ここに住んでいないでしょ。まあな、車にガソリン入れてある？え？入れてないよ。なんでだよ。確かにガソリンが少ないなって思った。もう入れろよ。 Let's go with the English. ただいま I'm home. ただいまってここに住んでいないでしょ。You're home? You don't live here, you know, or right? まあな。Well, yeah. 車にガソリンを入れてある? Is there gas put in the car? So there's our te aru sentence. Is there gas in the car? She's indirectly asking if Ando-san put gas in the car. But all she's actually asking is there gas in the car? There's an actor in a te iru form, right? The gasorin wo ireteiru. I'm putting gas in. So they're actually completely different meanings. Ireteiru. If I were to say, 今ガソリンも入れている, I'm in the process of putting gas in the car. It's the present continuous, so the action is ongoing. It doesn't necessarily describe a state of being. Only for certain verbs does the teiru form describe a state of beings. Ireteiru does not qualify as one of those verbs. Ireteiru means I'm putting it in right now. I'm putting gas in. So iretearu means there is gas in the car. So 結婚している, that means I am in the state of being married. 結婚している. But not all verbs are like that with the teiru form. There's only some of them. So te aru describes a state of being that has been brought into being and is still the case. So I believe te aru forms can only be used with transitive verbs because there had to be an action undertaken. So shimete aru means that someone did the closing. They're not a part of the sentence, but someone did it. So this window was closed by someone. That's an important part of the te aru form. Is there gas put in the car? 入れてないよ. No. There's no gas put in the car. This is, you'll know that the negative dictionary form of aru is nai. So in this case, irete nai means that it's the te aru form in the negative. Now, irete nai could also be the colloquial form of the negative te iru form, which would be irete inai, and sometimes in conversation it's shortened to irete nai. So this sentence could also be read as I didn't put gas in the car. But since we're using the te aru form and she asked the question in the te aru form, we can assume that it means that there is no gas in the car. Irete nai yo? Nande da yo? Why? Nande da yo? Tashukani. Come to think of it, or now that you say it, or you know, you're right. Gasorin ga sukunai na tte omotta. I thought, there's not much gas in here. Mo irero yo. Black background, light blue font. That means it's something new for us here. It's not a new verb, it's a new tense, and this is the command, sort of angry, command. Irero, you go to the o column, and that's it. That's it. You just leave it in the o column. Ireru becomes irero, and that is the command, put gas in, man. Mo, come on. Irero yo. Put gas in, man. Ando-san, eh? All right, so question time. I would like you to describe this air conditioner using the te aru form, the te aru form. We're going to go ahead and jump onto while, during, and between, aida ni, because otherwise we're never going to finish tonight. So while, during, and between with aida ni. So aida ni basically just means while, during, or between. But it can also be used to mean between items. So it can be used to mean between A and B. But the way we're going to be going over tonight is in reference to time. So Genki is using the aida ni that is used in reference to events happening, as opposed to the water bottle is between me and the keyboard. We're not going to be going over that usage of aida ni, although it is very similar. We're only going to be going over its usage in time. So a short event that happens during A is the most common usage of aida ni. So basically, while I was talking on the phone, someone walked in the door. Something like that. The walking in the door is just one little short event that happened while I was in the middle of something else. So during A, aida ni B happened. Now, if B, whatever it is, happens to be something that lasts for the entire time A is happening, then you don't use the ni particle. You just use aida. A, aida, B. You can also use aida ni with nouns. So for example, 学校の間に B. So during school, B. But you need to use the no particle before aida ni in that situation. So let's go ahead and go over some examples. The first ones from the very beginning are a little bit long because, well, you have to have two events for it. So, 仕事にいる間にYukiは編集が終わった. While I was at work, Yuki finished editing. Now, you're going to notice that most of these sentences will have iru or the te iru form, and that's because aida ni with verbs is most commonly, not always, but most commonly used with the te iru form. And in this case, shigoto ni iru, it can also be used with iru, which is to exist, of course. So while I was at work, shigoto ni iru aida ni Yuki wa henshu ga owatta. So while I was at work, Yuki finished editing. So you're going to see iru and te iru a lot here because that's the most common time you're going to be using aida ni. Nette iru aida ni Yuki ga furimashita. Not Yuki, but snow. Yuki ga furimashita. While I was sleeping, it snowed. Coloring's off there. Boku ga benkyou shite iru aida, tomodachi wa kaimono ni itta. So while I was studying, for the entire time, because there's no ni particle here, my friend went shopping. So while I was studying, yeah. 僕が勉強している間、友達は買い物に行った. Some more example sentences we've got 会議の間に So here we have a noun 会議の間に3回も電話が来ました During the meeting as many as 3 calls came 着替えている間にみんなどこかへ行ってしまいました While I was getting changed, everyone went off somewhere. Oh no. 雪が降っている間、本をずっと読んでいた So I was reading for the entire time that it was snowing. 雪が降っている間、本をずっと読んでいた For the whole time it was snowing, I read a book. Let's go over the dialogue really quickly. There's not really too much to this one. It's just you're mostly going to be using the te iru form. And with nouns, you need no before it. And the noun will generally be some kind of event. So like school or work or a meeting. And that's when you're going to be using it. And during that thing. So while that thing was occurring or during that thing is the translation of it, another thing happened or another thing was happening. わかったわかった。ちなみに出かけている間に何か電話来た？電話って？そう、電話を待っている。何の電話を待っているの？宅急便だよ。なんで宅急便がここに電話するんだよ。だってあんたが寝ている間にパソコンも使って商品も頼んだんだよ。私に？いや、違います。Full speed。わかったわかった。ちなみに出かけている間に何か電話来た？電話って？そう、電話を待っている。何の電話を待っているの？宅急便だよ。なんで宅急便がここに電話するんだよ。だってあんたが寝ている間にパソコンも使って商品も頼んだんだよ。私に？いや、違います。Okay, let's go over the English quick. わかったわかった。ちなみに出かけている間に何か電話来た？ Okay, okay. By the way, while I was out, did any calls come? So while I was out, 出かけている間に did any calls come? 何か電話来た？ So if a call had come, it would just have been a short event that happened during the time I was out. So we would use 間に。電話って？ Calls? そう、電話を待っている。Yeah, I'm waiting for a phone call. 何の電話を待っているの？ Huh? What kind of phone call are you waiting for? 宅急便だよ。A parcel delivery service. なんで宅急便はここに電話するんだよ。Why is a parcel delivery service calling here? だってあんたが寝ている間にパソコンも使って商品も頼んだんだよ。Because while you were sleeping, I used the computer and ordered some stuff. 私に？ For me? いや、違います。No, not for you. Literally, no, you are wrong. 違います。Question time. You get annoyed when something happens or someone does something while you are something else. So in my case, 集中して働いている間にいろいろ話しかけられるとイライラします。So here we use the passive form. I get annoyed when イライラします。I get annoyed when I'm really focused and concentrated on working and someone talks to me about random things while I'm working. That's when I get annoyed. So what is something that annoys you when you're doing something else? So please try to explain something like that to me. On to making something an adjective, which is quite useful, I feel like. So making things adjectives, all you need to do to make something an adjective, for example, make something fun. For an E adjective is you cut the E, or you change it into ku, whichever you prefer, and add suru. So 楽しくする means to make it fun. For non-adjectives, you add ni suru. So きれいにする, which could mean either make it clean or make it pretty. So it's quite useful, right? Let's just go over a few quick examples. It's quite simple. That's just all you really do. 小さくしてください. Please make it small. 小さくしてください. 大きくしました. I made it big. 安全にする. I'll make it safe. So it's literally just make it something. Some longer examples are 僕の国を良くしたいけど、まだ若くて政治や経済が全くわかりません。I would like to make my country better, but I'm still young and I don't understand anything about politics or economics. 僕の国を良くしたい. I want to make my country better. 良くしたい。この長い文章を簡単にしてくれませんか? You wouldn't be able to make this really long sentence easy, would you? 簡単にしてくれませんか? Make it easy. wouldn't be able to make it easy for me, would you? So that's a very polite してくれませんか? プールが冷たくない?暖かくしてもいい?暖かくしてもいい? There's a nice tongue twister. Isn't the pool cold? Is it okay if I make it warmer? プールが I just realized I didn't think about this sentence at all until I read it right now. I was thinking if it's like it's a heated pool or maybe dumping in boiled water, but I realize now reading it out loud that there's really only one way that this could be translated, and I'm a little embarrassed. All right, anyway. プールが冷たくない?暖かくしてもいい? Oh, I should have read that out loud once before I actually put it on the live lesson. Okay, anyway. So that's basically how you would use that form. Let's go ahead and jump into the dialogue. I'll read it slowly one time and then at full speed. Then we'll go over the translations and I'll get to your questions. So, 安藤さん。ところで、冷蔵庫の中をちょっと冷たくしてくれない?え、食べ物頼んだの?いや、ビールがちょっとぬるかった。自分の家の冷蔵庫の中を冷たくしたら俺の家が汚い。なんだよ。じゃあ、きれいにしたら Full speed. ところで、冷蔵庫の中をちょっと冷たくしてくれない?え、食べ物頼んだの?いや、ビールがちょっとぬるかった。自分の家の冷蔵庫の中を冷たくしたら俺の家が汚い。なんだよ。じゃあ、きれいにしたら Yuki's getting a little annoyed in this dialogue here. ところで、冷蔵庫の中をちょっと冷たくしてくれない? By the way, wouldn't you make the fridge a little cooler for me? え、食べ物頼んだの? So she's wondering if maybe the thing he ordered yesterday on the computer while she was sleeping is food. Let's just jump back up here really quick. 冷たくしてくれない? So make it colder. いや、ビールがちょっとぬるかった。ぬるい means sort of like tepid, lukewarm, tepid, not very, it's not a very positive word. You don't really want things to be nurui very often, unless you really like a bath that's not very hot, but also not very cold. Like it's not really warm, it's like between, yeah, tepid. いや、ビールがちょっとぬるかった。No, the beer was a little warm. 自分の家の冷蔵庫の中を冷たくしたら Why don't you make the fridge in your own house colder? So, you remember this is the 冷たくしたらどうですか? So we did たらどうですか quite a while. Maybe it was even, I don't know if it was Genki 1 or beginning of Genki 2, but 冷たくしたらどうですか is the full phrase. But in situations like this where you drop off the どうですか 冷たくしたら it's very it feels a little bit aggressive. It's a little bit aggressive. It's a suggestion, but it's like an aggressive suggestion. 冷たくしたら Why don't you do it yourself? Is basically what she's saying. 俺の家が汚い. My house is dirty. なんだよ. What the heck? じゃあ, well, きれいにしたら Why don't you make it clean? Alright, so here's what I want you to do with this picture. Tell me what you think this fox would tell you to do if it could speak. What do you think this dog would say to you if he could speak? Please use an adverb and してください. してください. That's what we're going for. I don't know how many people are going to get the reference here, or if you've seen this movie, but please tell me what you think that they would be saying. I want you to with てほしい. This is a very useful form. You'll probably use it a lot. Well, maybe not a lot, but you'll use it. It's very easy to make. All you do is you take the て form and add 欲しい, which means to want, usually an item when it's used on its own, but in the てほしい form, it means you want someone to do something. So the person who you want to do the thing for you is marked by に, the に particle. So person に て form 欲しい. If you don't want someone to do something, or you want them to not do something, there's two different ways you can do it. One is the て form and 欲しくない. So you put the 欲しい into the negative. Or you can take the negative て form. So for example, 食べないで and add 欲しい. Either way is fine. The nuance is slightly different, and you'll see that in some of the examples. 言わないでほしい is an explicit request. 言ってほしくない merely states that you don't want the other guy to tell anybody, and the request is only implied. As a consequence, the latter is softer as it would be in English. That makes sense. There you go. So 言わないでほしい is an explicit request, so it's a little bit more stronger, whereas 言ってほしくない is not necessarily an explicit request. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that, Tsubasa. That helps a lot, actually. And the person is also marked in those by the ni particle. So person ni, te form, hoshikunai. Person ni, negative te form, hoshi. Either one of those is I don't want you to. So some examples are 食べてほしい I want you to eat. 寝てほしい I want you to sleep. Now here's the two different ways you could say I don't want you to do something. 食べないでほしい The difference here is I want you to not eat. I want you to not eat. 寝てほしくない I don't want you to sleep. So if I were to use the same sentence, 食べてほしくない I don't want you to eat versus 食べないでほしい I want you to not eat. They basically may mean the same thing, but they just feel a little bit different. Some more complicated sentences. みんなたくさん勉強してほしい I want everyone to study lots. できるだけ as much as possible. This is a very useful opener. できるだけ which is the same as なるべく as much as possible. お金をたくさん貯めてほしい I want you to save a lot of money. できるだけお金をたくさん貯めてほしいいや本当はあんまり比べてほしくないな Really, I don't want you to compare too much. いや本当はあんまり比べてほしくない Nah, I really don't want you to compare too much. 俺のことをバカにしてないでほしい I want you to not make fun of me. So I really just held to that 欲しくない being I don't want you to something and ないでほしい being I want you to not do that thing. So that's the only difference there. 僕のことをバカにしないでほしい I want you to not make fun of me. And that's it. Let's go ahead and jump into the dialogue. Slowly once, then full speed. We'll go into the translation and get to questions. ここの方が住みやすいしもう違う人のところに行ってほしいでも荷物がじゃあ来たらすぐ連絡してほしいよはい来たら連絡する Full speed ここの方が住みやすいしもう違う人のところに行ってほしいでも荷物がじゃあ来たらすぐ連絡してほしいよはい来たら連絡する Alright, let's go over the English translation. We'll get to your question. So, ここの方が住みやすいし Here is easier to live, or it's easier to live here. The she implies that there's other reasons as well, but one of them is that it's much easier to live here. That's why I don't want to leave. もう違う人のところに行ってほしい I want you to go 行ってほしい to someone else's place already もう違う人のところに行ってほしい That もう is already でも荷物が But my package じゃあ来たらすぐ連絡してほしい Okay, when it comes I want you to contact me right away 来たらすぐ連絡してほしい Okay, when it comes I want you to contact me right away すぐ right away はい来たら連絡する Yep, when it comes I'll contact you We still don't know what the package is. Question time. What is something that you want someone to do for you as soon as possible? Yuki にクッキーをもっと作ってほしい I want Yuki to make more cookies for me. Alright guys, well, we made it to the end, so thumbs up を攻撃してください Please smash the thumbs up button, and if you're not subscribed already, チャンネル登録お願いします Please subscribe and hit the bell so that you know when we go live. Have a great one, guys. Thank you so much. See you next time. ありがとうございます。
お疲れ様でした。
また次のビデオで会いましょうね。 日本語勉強したいのか？
俺と同じ風に日本語を喋れるようになりたいのか？
この本持ってるのか？ Then we're here to help. え、そうなの？俺は無理って言おうと思った。On the Tokini Andy Patreon, we have listening and shadowing practice, Genki vocabulary practice, Genki textbook practice where Yuki, Ando, and I are your partners. Eventually, even workbook practice.
え、そうなの？給料出る？
確かに
Yeah, sure.
給料出るんだ。
After Genki 1, we'll be covering Genki 2, and eventually even intermediate textbooks. Detailed grammar lessons and Japanese Q&As will, as always, be on the YouTube for free. Tokini Andy Patreon, live right now. よろしくね。
よろしくお願いします。